Welcome to the Warfront Stories World War II channel. Subscribe to our channel because every day we publish stories about the valor of American soldiers based on real events. Support us. Like our videos if you like what we do for you. April 11, 1945, 3:15 p.m. The air carries the metallic scent of gunpowder mixed with the sickly sweet stench of decay. Private James Hoyt grips his M1 Garand tighter as the 6th Armored Division's tank crawls forward through the dense Thuringian forest near Weimar, Germany. The spring leaves filter dappled sunlight onto the advancing American forces, but there's nothing peaceful about this verdant landscape. Intelligence reports have indicated something lies ahead, a Nazi concentration camp called Buchenwald. The men of Combat Command B have heard rumors, stories whispered by liberated civilians in France, tales of mass graves and industrialized death. But nothing has prepared them for what awaits beyond the perimeter fence, crowned with barbed wire. Nothing could prepare any human being for the systematic horror they are about to witness. "Sweet Jesus," mutters Private Harry Herder, Jr., barely 20 years old, as the first whiff of the camp reaches his nostrils. The smell is indescribable. Human waste, rotting flesh, disease, and despair concentrated into a miasma that seems to cling to their uniforms. Some men vomit, others pray silently. They are hardened combat veterans who have faced death at Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge. But this is different. This isn't combat. This is something else entirely. Radio operator Corporal Benjamin Samuelson peers through binoculars at the sprawling complex atop Ettersburg Mountain. Through the tree line, he can make out watchtowers, long wooden barracks, and thin figures moving behind the fence. His hand shakes slightly as he lowers the binoculars. "Sir," he says to Lieutenant Howard Buchanan, "I think we found it." What they've found isn't merely a prison camp. It's the physical manifestation of humanity's darkest capabilities. It's a factory designed not for production, but for suffering. The men advancing on Buchenwald concentration camp on April 11, 1945, are about to become witnesses to history's most documented atrocity, and unwitting participants in one of the most horrifying rescue operations ever conducted. The following account is based entirely on sworn testimonies, military reports, medical documents, photographs, and first-person accounts. Every name, date, and location is real. Every horror described actually happened. This is not fiction. This is history at its most monstrous. April 10th, 1945. The day before liberation. Within Buchenwald's electrified fences, rumors spread like typhus among the skeletal prisoners. The sound of distant artillery fires suggests the Americans are coming closer. The Nazi SS guards are growing increasingly agitated, burning documents and preparing for evacuation. Hans Eiden, a German political prisoner who secretly leads the camp's underground resistance, gathers his most trusted comrades in the typhus ward, where SS men rarely venture for fear of infection. Their gaunt faces look like death masks in the dim light filtering through the barracks' filthy windows. "They plan to evacuate us tomorrow," Eiden whispers, his voice hoarse from years of malnourishment. "But not all of us. Those too sick to march will be eliminated." Joseph Cyrankiewicz, a Polish resistance fighter imprisoned since 1941, nods gravely. His skin stretches tightly over his cheekbones, eyes sunken into dark hollows. "How many?" he asks. "Thousands," Eiden responds. "They've already dug pits behind the crematorium. This isn't speculation. The prisoners have insider information. Certain inmates assigned to administrative duties have glimpsed SS documents ordering the special treatment of prisoners unable to evacuate." In Nazi terminology, special treatment means execution. The resistance leaders debate their options in hushed tones. They possess a few smuggled weapons, 3 pistols with limited ammunition, and some crude knives fashioned from stolen metal. Against the heavily armed SS guards, an open rebellion would be suicide. But doing nothing means certain death for thousands. "We must delay them," suggests Cyrankiewicz. "Sabotage the evacuation somehow. Every hour we buy brings the Americans closer." Outside the barracks, SS Hauptsturmführer Hermann Pister strides across the roll call square, his polished boots clicking on the stones. As camp commandant, Pister has overseen countless atrocities since taking command in 1942. He has signed the paperwork authorizing medical experiments, approved mass executions, and supervised the expansion of the camp to its current population of approximately 45,000 prisoners. Now, as Allied forces close in, Pister has received explicit orders from Ernst Kaltenbrunner, chief of the Reich Main Security Office. No prisoners must fall into enemy hands alive. The evidence of Nazi crimes must be eliminated. In his office within the SS administrative building, Pister reviews the evacuation plans with his subordinates. The healthy prisoners will be force-marched deeper into German territory. Those unable to walk will receive special handling by specialized SS units. The first transport must leave at dawn, Pister orders, his voice betraying no emotion as he effectively sentences thousands to death. Priority goes to the political prisoners and Jews. The crematorium is to operate continuously until evacuation is complete. As darkness falls over Buchenwald, both prisoners and captors prepare for what is to come. The prisoners hide their few weapons, memorize guard rotations, and whisper plans. The SS sharpen their knives, check their pistols, and burn incriminating documents. In the children's block, 16-year-old Elie Wiesel, imprisoned with his father, listens to the distant rumble of artillery. Having already survived Auschwitz, the young Hungarian Jew recognizes the sound of approaching liberation. But he also knows the Nazis will not surrender their victims easily. The most dangerous hours still lie ahead. April 10, 1945, 11:30 p.m. The resistance makes its move. Under cover of darkness, Hans Eiden and 20 trusted men sabotage the camp's power station. Carefully planned over months, the operation requires precise timing. With deliberate movements, they damage the electrical systems in a way that appears accidental, a breakdown that will take critical hours to repair. Without electricity, the fence is dead. The watchtower's searchlights are blind. Most importantly, the SS communication system is crippled, making coordinated mass executions more difficult. In the communications office, SS officer Johannes Hasselbruch discovers the power failure with mounting panic. He attempts to contact SS headquarters in Weimar for instructions, but the backup generators provide only enough power for essential operations, not enough for the radio transmitter at full capacity. "Get it fixed immediately," he barks at the engineering officer. "We must begin evacuations at 0500 hours. The engineer stammers his response. "Herr Sturmbannführer, the damage appears extensive. It may take until morning to—" Hasselbruch cuts him off with a backhanded slap that sends the man stumbling against the wall. "Then work through the night. If the prisoners aren't moving by dawn, I'll have you shot for sabotage." Meanwhile, in the secret radio room hidden beneath the prisoners' clothing depot, German communist prisoner Willy Bleicher makes contact with approaching American forces using a transmitter built from stolen components. His message is urgent and clear. "This is Buchenwald. SS planning mass execution before evacuation. Approximately 45,000 prisoners, many dying. Request immediate assistance." The transmission is brief. Maintaining the radio draws dangerous amounts of power from the sabotaged electrical system. But the message gets through. At the headquarters of the U.S. 6th Armored Division, communications officer Lieutenant Daniel Summers receives the broken transmission. "Sir," he reports to Colonel George W. Reed, Jr., "we've intercepted a transmission from inside what appears to be Buchenwald camp. They're reporting imminent executions of prisoners." Colonel Reed studies his maps, where intelligence has already marked the suspected location of Buchenwald. His division is still engaged with German forces in the area. Diverting resources to the camp could jeopardize the broader offensive. But the humanitarian emergency cannot be ignored. "Alert Combat Command B," Reed orders. "Tell them to prepare for advance reconnaissance toward Ettersburg at first light." Back in Buchenwald, as midnight passes, a different kind of horror unfolds in the medical experimentation block. SS Dr. Erwin Ding-Schuler works feverishly to destroy evidence of his typhus experiments. Since 1941, he has infected hundreds of prisoners with the deadly disease to test vaccines for the German army. His meticulous records document the suffering of each test subject in clinical detail: weight loss, fever progression, survival rates. Now these documents burn in metal trash cans while Ding-Schuler prepares lethal injections for his remaining subjects. They know too much, have seen too much. Despite the power outage, the doctor works by lantern light, filling syringes with phenol, a painful death that stops the heart almost instantly when injected directly. In Block 46, where the experiments took place, 38 severely ill prisoners lie on bare wooden bunks. They are mostly Polish and Russian prisoners, already infected with various strains of typhus for scientific research. As Ding-Schuler approaches with his medical bag, they understand what's coming. Some are too weak to resist. Others begin to pray quietly. The doctor's assistant, himself a prisoner forced to participate in the experiments, feels his stomach tighten with dread. For years, he has survived by following orders, becoming complicit in unimaginable cruelty. Tonight might be his last chance to make a different choice. As Ding-Schuler prepares the first injection, the assistant intentionally knocks over the tray of syringes. The precious phenol spills across the dirty floor. "Clumsy fool!" the doctor shouts, striking the man across the face. But the delay is enough. The distant sound of air raid sirens wails across the camp, forcing Ding-Schuler to abandon his execution plan temporarily. Allied bombers are approaching Weimar. All personnel must take shelter. The doomed prisoners in Block 46 have been granted a few more hours of life. Whether this reprieve will save them depends on how quickly the Americans can reach Buchenwald, and whether they will arrive before the SS can complete their final atrocity. April 11, 1945, 3:15 a.m. In the children's barracks of Buchenwald, over 700 boys huddled together for warmth in the pre-dawn darkness. Among them is 16-year-old Elie Wiesel and his friend Kalman, both survivors of Auschwitz. The children, ranging from as young as 4 to teenagers of 17, represent the Nazis' most vulnerable victims: Jewish children from across Europe, Roma children, and sons of political prisoners. Kalman shakes Wiesel awake with urgent whispers. Something is happening. The guards are nervous. Through the barrack windows, they can see unusual activity. SS officers rushing between buildings, trucks being loaded with documents. The camp's normal routine has dissolved into barely controlled chaos. Gustav Herzog, a Czech prisoner assigned as supervisor of the children's block, gathers the older boys. At great personal risk, Herzog has been protecting these children for months, falsifying documents to list them as adults, which makes them useful labor rather than immediate targets for extermination, and ensuring they receive extra food whenever possible. "Listen carefully," Herzog whispers. "The underground has disabled the electricity. The SS plans to evacuate the camp today. When they begin the selection, you must appear strong enough to work. Anyone who looks too weak will be shot." 13-year-old Israel Lau, who will later become chief rabbi of Israel, clings to his older brother Naphtali. The Polish brothers have survived multiple camps through a combination of luck and their fellow prisoners' protection. Israel is too young to work and has been hidden from selections throughout his imprisonment. "What about the little ones?" Naphtali asks Herzog, nodding toward the youngest children, many too weak to stand without assistance. Herzog's face darkens. "We hide them. Under floorboards, in the latrine pits if necessary. The resistance is working on a plan." Outside in the roll call square, SS Sturmbannführer Hans Merbach, the transport officer responsible for evacuation, is growing increasingly agitated. The power outage has delayed his timetable. Dawn will break in less than 3 hours, and not a single transport is ready. Merbach summons the capos, prisoners given supervisory roles over other inmates in exchange for privileges. Many capos are hardened criminals, specifically selected for their brutality toward fellow prisoners. The evacuation begins at 0600 hours, regardless of the power situation, Merbach announces. Any prisoner who cannot march will be dealt with. Any prisoner who attempts escape will be shot. Any prisoner who disrupts the evacuation will be hanged publicly. The capos are dismissed to prepare their blocks. Some will faithfully execute these orders. Others, secretly aligned with the resistance, will deliberately create confusion and delays. In Block 22, where prominent political prisoners are housed, Ernst Thälmann, the former leader of the German Communist Party who has been imprisoned since 1933, receives news of the planned evacuation from a sympathetic capo. Thälmann has survived years of solitary confinement and torture, becoming a symbol of resistance within the camp. "They'll come for the political prisoners first," the capo warns. "Especially you, Comrade Thälmann." Thälmann nods gravely. After 12 years of imprisonment, he harbors no illusions about Nazi mercy. How close are the Americans? Perhaps 20 kilometers, maybe less. Not close enough, Thälmann concludes. Hours, not kilometers, will determine his fate. In the camp's administrative building, SS men work by candlelight, burning personnel files and prisoner records. The distinctive smell of burning paper mingles with the camp's ever-present stench of death. Behind the crematorium, in darkness so complete it seems solid, 2 SS guards with shovels expand a mass grave already dug days earlier. The pit measures approximately 10 meters long by 4 meters wide, large enough for hundreds of bodies. "How many do you think?" one guard asks, his shovel slicing into the cold earth. "Thousands," replies the other. "Anyone who can't march. The Jews first, then the political prisoners." They work in silence after that, the steady rhythm of their shovels marking time until dawn, when the killing will begin in earnest. April 11, 1945, 5:30 a.m. First light creeps over the eastern horizon as the prisoners of Buchenwald are roused for roll call. The camp stirs like a disturbed anthill, skeletal figures emerging from barracks into the cold morning air. Their breath forms clouds of vapor that hang briefly before dissipating into nothingness, much like the lives of so many who have passed through these gates. SS Sturmbannführer Hermann Pister surveys the assembly from the watchtower, his expression grim. The power remains out, disrupting his carefully planned evacuation schedule. Worse, morning reports confirm his fears. American reconnaissance units have been spotted less than 15 kilometers from the camp perimeter. Pister makes a swift decision. There is no time for the methodical evacuation he had planned. Priority shifts to eliminating evidence, both documents and witnesses. "Begin immediate evacuation of all able-bodied prisoners," he orders. "The others will remain for special handling." This innocuous phrase, special handling, seals the fate of thousands. In Nazi bureaucratic language, it signifies execution. On the roll call square, SS guards with machine guns and attack dogs begin the selection process. Prisoners are divided into 2 groups, those who can march and those who cannot. The dividing line between life and death is arbitrary and cruel. A momentary stumble, a cough at the wrong time, visible symptoms of illness. Any sign of weakness sends prisoners to the left group, those selected for immediate execution. In Block 8, where typhus patients lie on bare wooden pallets without medication or care, panic spreads as SS men approach. Marcel Sternberger, a French physician imprisoned since 1943 for treating resistance fighters, moves quickly among the patients. "Anyone who can stand must do so now," he urges, helping emaciated men to their feet. "If you stay in bed, you will die today." Some patients rise through sheer force of will, swaying on stick-like legs. Others are too far gone, delirious with fever or unconscious. Sternberger knows he cannot save them all. The best he can do is prioritize those with some chance of survival. Meanwhile, in the children's block, Gustav Herzog implements the resistance plan. The youngest and weakest children are hidden beneath floorboards, in crawl spaces between barracks, even inside the filthy latrine pits covered with boards and excrement to mask their presence. 16-year-old Robert Buchler, a Hungarian Jewish prisoner, helps conceal 7-year-old Joseph Kleinman inside a hollow space in the barrack wall. As he seals the opening with a loose board, he whispers, "Not a sound, Joseph. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, silence is life today. The child nods, eyes wide with terror but understanding the stakes perfectly. At 7, Joseph has witnessed more atrocities than most adults in peacetime see in a lifetime. In the SS guardhouse, a different drama unfolds. SS Oberscharführer Martin Sommer, infamous throughout the camp as the hangman of Buchenwald for his sadistic punishments, prepares for his final acts of cruelty. Since 1943, Sommer has personally tortured and executed hundreds of prisoners, often with Baroque brutality, hanging men by their wrists from trees, submerging them in ice water, or simply beating them to death for his amusement. Now, as the Reich collapses, Sommer selects his final victims. He has a personal list of prisoners who have defied him, survived his tortures, or witnessed his worst excesses. They must not live to testify. First on his list is Stefan Heimann, a German Jewish communist who once served as Sommer's clerk and knows the details of his crimes. Sommer finds Heimann during the selection process and pulls him from the line. "You're coming with me," Sommer says with chilling casualness. "Special assignment." Heimann knows exactly what this means but shows no fear. Instead, he looks Sommer directly in the eyes and says clearly, loud enough for nearby prisoners to hear, "The Americans will be here today. Everyone will know what you've done. Your name will become synonymous with butchery." Sommer strikes him with a truncheon, drawing blood from Heimann's temple, but the prisoner's words have struck home. For the first time, doubt creeps into Sommer's calculations. Will there be consequences for his actions? Is there still time to establish an alibi, to distance himself from the worst atrocities? As the sun climbs higher in the sky, the first evacuation transport assembles at the camp gates. Approximately 2,000 prisoners, mostly able-bodied Jewish men, are formed into columns 5 abreast. SS guards with machine guns and attack dogs surround them. The prisoners carry no provisions for the journey ahead. A forced march with no clear destination beyond, away from advancing Americans. As the gates open, an SS officer reads a final announcement. Any prisoner who falls behind will be shot. Any prisoner who leaves the column will be shot. Any prisoner who speaks to civilians will be shot. The evacuation, or death march, of Buchenwald has begun. But for those left behind, deemed too sick or weak to march, a more immediate horror awaits. The SS execution squads are preparing for their grim task behind the crematorium, where the mass graves lie ready. April 11, 1945, 9:15 a.m. The underground resistance of Buchenwald faces its most critical moment. For years, the secret organization has worked to sabotage Nazi operations within the camp, smuggling food to the weakest prisoners, gathering intelligence, and maintaining morale. Now, with mass executions imminent and American forces still hours away, they must take direct action. Hans Eiden, the German communist prisoner who leads the underground, gathers his core group in the abandoned stone quarry worksite. His face is gaunt from years of starvation, but his eyes burn with fierce determination. "The time has come," he tells the gathered men, their skeletal frames belying their resolve. "The SS is preparing executions behind the crematorium. We have confirmation from our source in the Sonderkommando." The Sonderkommando, prisoners forced to operate the crematorium, have indeed reported disturbing preparations. 3 mass graves dug, SS officers testing machine guns, lists of barracks to be processed in sequence. Józef Cyrankiewicz, the Polish resistance fighter, addresses the practical concerns. "We have 3 pistols with limited ammunition, kitchen knives, and rocks. The SS has machine guns and trained attack dogs." Eiden nods grimly. "Which is why we cannot confront them directly. Our plan is distraction and disruption, not open rebellion." The resistance has maintained a secret cache of weapons and supplies, obtained through bribery, theft, and smuggling over years of imprisonment. Now these precious resources will be deployed in a desperate gamble to save lives. While this meeting takes place, SS Oberscharführer Wolfgang Otto supervises the first executions behind the crematorium. 30 Russian prisoners of war, 2 injured from previous abuse to join the evacuation march, are lined up beside the freshly dug pit. Otto reads from an official document. By order of Reichsfuhrer SS Heinrich Himmler, no prisoners of Buchenwald shall fall into enemy hands alive. Your execution is hereby carried out in the name of the German Reich. The Russians stand with quiet dignity. Many have endured 2 or more years of brutal captivity. One man, identified in SS records only as prisoner 27891, steps forward and spits at Otto's feet. The world will know what happened here, he says in accented German. Your 1,000-year Reich lasted 12 years. Humanity's memory is longer. Otto's face flushes with rage. He draws his Luger pistol and shoots the prisoner in the face at point-blank range. The man crumples into the pit, the first of what the SS plans to be thousands. Continue, Otto orders the firing squad, his voice tight with suppressed fury. Machine guns rattle. Bodies fall. The execution proceeds with mechanical efficiency. Meanwhile, the resistance plan unfolds. In a coordinated action, prisoners in multiple barracks stage diversions. A fire in the clothing depot, a fight between capos, a prisoner apparently attempting escape toward the fence. Each incident draws SS attention and resources, thinning their presence at the execution site. Ernst Thälmann, the former Communist Party leader imprisoned since 1933, knows his name is high on the SS execution list. As a high-profile political prisoner, his survival would be particularly damaging to the Nazi regime. When SS men arrive at Block 22 to collect him, he is hiding in a secret compartment beneath the floorboards, a space normally used to conceal resistance materials. The SS search the barracks but fail to find him. Enraged, they select 10 random prisoners from the block for immediate execution as punishment. These men are marched toward the crematorium, where Otto's execution squad continues its grim work. At approximately 10:30 a.m., the resistance makes its most audacious move. Using the sabotaged electrical system as cover, they trigger the camp's air raid siren, normally used to warn of Allied bombing. The sudden wailing causes momentary confusion among the SS guards, many of whom instinctively look skyward for approaching aircraft. In this brief window of disorganization, resistance members cut the telephone lines between the camp commandant's office and the execution site. Now, Pister cannot communicate directly with his execution squads. Simultaneously, other resistance members spread a rumor among the guards. American paratroopers have been spotted dropping beyond the perimeter. This false report, deliberately planted, causes several SS guards to abandon their posts at the execution pits to investigate the non-existent threat. The combined diversionary tactics slow the executions significantly. By 11 a.m., only approximately 150 prisoners have been killed, far fewer than the thousands originally planned. SS Commandant Pister, increasingly aware that time is running out, orders all remaining SS personnel to focus on document destruction rather than prisoner execution. Precious Reich documents, evidence of medical experiments, execution orders, and prisoner processing must not fall into American hands. The resistance has bought critical hours with their desperate actions, but American forces still have not arrived, and the SS has not abandoned the camp. The most dangerous period lies ahead, when the Nazi guards, realizing escape is impossible, might choose to slaughter as many witnesses as possible in their final hours. April 11, 1945, 11:45 a.m. 20 kilometers southwest of Buchenwald, the men of the 6th Armored Division's Combat Command B advance through the Thuringian Forest. Their objective? Buchenwald concentration camp, which intelligence reports indicate contains thousands of prisoners in imminent danger of execution. Lieutenant James Hoyt, serving under Captain Frederick Keffer, leads a reconnaissance jeep, followed by Sherman tanks. The small American force moves cautiously through the German countryside, alert for ambushes or last-ditch resistance from SS or Wehrmacht units. Intel says the camp is just beyond that ridge, Hoyt informs his men, pointing to a wooded hillside ahead. We don't know what condition the prisoners are in or how many guards remain. Private Harry Herder Jr., the youngest soldier in the unit at barely 20 years old, scans the tree line nervously. Though a combat veteran of the Normandy campaign, nothing has prepared him for the humanitarian catastrophe they are about to encounter. "Sir," Herder asks hesitantly, "the reports about these camps, are they really as bad as they say?" Lieutenant Hoyt's expression darkens. "Intelligence believes they're worse than anything we've been told, but we'll know soon enough." As the American forces approach Buchenwald, dramatic events unfold within the camp perimeter. The resistance movement, learning of the Americans' proximity through their secret radio, launches its most daring action yet, an armed uprising against the remaining SS guards. At precisely noon, as recorded in multiple survivor testimonies, over 300 prisoners attack their captors, using the limited weapons they've accumulated: stolen pistols, improvised clubs, rocks, and kitchen implements. The assault targets SS guards at key locations: the main gate, the commandant's office, and the crematorium area where executions continue. Wojciech Dvorak, a Czech resistance member imprisoned since 1943, leads the assault on the crematorium. Armed with only a meat cleaver stolen from the camp kitchen, he and 5 other prisoners rush the 2 SS guards overseeing the executions. The element of surprise works in their favor. The guards are overwhelmed before they can bring their weapons to bear. "For 3 years I've watched you murder my friends," Dvorak tells SS Oberscharführer Wolfgang Otto as he holds the meat cleaver to the Nazi's throat. "Give me one reason not to cut your head off." Otto, suddenly finding himself at the mercy of those he tormented, offers none. Instead, he attempts to reach for his sidearm. Dvorak strikes without hesitation, ending the career of one of Buchenwald's most notorious killers. Meanwhile, at the main gate, Hans Eiden leads a larger group in an assault on the guardhouse. The fighting here is more intense, with SS guards firing into the charging prisoners. Many inmates fall, but their numbers overwhelm the depleted Nazi force. By 12:30 p.m., prisoners control the main gate of Buchenwald, an extraordinary reversal after years of helpless captivity. In the camp's administrative building, SS Commandant Pister realizes the situation is lost. With American forces approaching and a prisoner uprising in progress, he orders the remaining SS personnel to abandon the camp. Approximately 40 guards, still heavily armed, gather vehicles for a desperate escape attempt. "Burn everything," Pister commands as he stuffs personal documents into a leather briefcase. "No records must remain." The SS men set fire to the administrative offices, the records building, and the commandant's quarters. Thick black smoke rises above the camp, visible to the approaching American forces still several kilometers away. As the SS prepare to flee, they face a final decision regarding the thousands of prisoners still under their control. Some officers advocate a last act of mass murder, setting fire to the barracks with prisoners locked inside. Others, more concerned with their own escape, argue against wasting precious time on further killing when American capture seems imminent. In the confusion, the remaining SS guards abandon their posts. By 2 p.m., effective Nazi control of Buchenwald has collapsed. The prisoners, still wearing their striped uniforms and yellow stars, emerge cautiously from barracks. Many cannot believe their tormentors have actually departed. After years of psychological conditioning to absolute obedience, they move hesitantly, as if expecting punishment for their autonomy. 16-year-old Elie Wiesel later described this surreal moment in his memoir, Night. "Our first act as free men was to throw ourselves onto the provisions. We thought only of that, not of revenge, not of our families, nothing but bread." The prisoner resistance, now effectively in control of the camp, organizes armed patrols to secure the perimeter. They fear the SS might return for a final act of vengeance before the Americans arrive. These patrols, composed of emaciated men barely strong enough to carry weapons, maintain a vigilant watch at the gates and towers, roles reversed in a way that would have been unimaginable days earlier. At approximately 3:15 p.m., the first American jeep crests the hill overlooking Buchenwald. Lieutenant James Hoyt, seeing the smoke rising from the camp and uncertain what awaits, orders his men to advance with caution. What they are about to witness will haunt them for the remainder of their lives. April 11, 1945, 3:30 p.m. the first American troops approached the main gate of Buchenwald. The advance patrol, led by Captain Frederick Keffer, includes Lieutenant James Hoyt, Private Harry Herder Jr., Corporal Benjamin Samuelson, Lieutenant William Cowling, and Tech Sergeant Herbert Gottschalk. They approach cautiously, weapons ready, uncertain what reception awaits them. What they see stops them in their tracks. Above the camp gate, wrought in iron, are the words, "Jedem das Sein," to each what they deserve. Beyond this cynical motto lies a scene from nightmares. Thousands of prisoners in striped uniforms crowd toward the fence. Many are skeletal, barely recognizable as human beings. Some hold makeshift weapons, clear evidence of the recent uprising. Others simply stand, staring at the Americans with hollow, disbelieving eyes. "My God," whispers Corporal Samuelson. "What is this place?" Captain Keffer, struggling to maintain military composure, orders the gate opened. As it swings wide, the Americans experience something none of them expected. The prisoners cheer. Men too weak to stand wave from barracks windows. Those with strength remaining rush forward, reaching out to touch the American uniforms, as if to verify these liberators are real and not hallucinations born of starvation. Herbert Gottschalk, the only German-speaking member of the patrol, attempts to communicate with the prisoner leadership. He is approached by Hans Eiden, the resistance leader, whose emaciated frame and prison uniform stand in stark contrast to his commanding presence. "We have held the camp since 1300 hours, Eiden reports in German. "Most SS have fled. We have captured approximately 15 guards who attempted to hide in prisoner uniforms." As this initial contact occurs, the Americans begin to comprehend the scale of the humanitarian catastrophe before them. The camp holds more than 21,000 survivors. Thousands are critically ill with typhus, dysentery, and tuberculosis. Hundreds are children. All show signs of severe malnutrition. Many will die in the coming days despite liberation, their bodies too damaged by starvation and disease to recover. Private Herder, overwhelmed by the sights and smells, vomits beside the jeep. Captain Keffer places a hand on the young soldier's shoulder. "Pull yourself together, son. These people need us now." Lieutenant Cowling, the patrol's medic, makes a swift assessment of the medical situation. "Sir," he reports to Captain Keffer, "we're looking at thousands of critical cases. Many won't survive without immediate intervention. We need medical units, food, clean water, everything." Keffer nods grimly. "Radio HQ, tell them we've secured Buchenwald and request immediate medical support. Emphasize the critical nature. Thousands of lives at stake." As this communication goes out, the Americans begin a preliminary inspection of the camp, guided by resistance members. What they document in these first hours will later become critical evidence in war crimes trials. They see the crematorium, still warm from recent use, with half-burned bodies awaiting processing. They see the execution room with hooks on the walls where prisoners were hung by their wrists. They see the medical block where experiments were conducted on living subjects. At Block 46, Lieutenant Cowling discovers the typhus experimentation ward. The scene inside defies description. Living skeletons lie on bare wooden bunks, many too weak to acknowledge the Americans' arrival. They have been deliberately infected with typhus so Nazi doctors could test vaccines. "These men need immediate evacuation," Cowling states flatly, "and whoever did this needs to hang." Corporal Samuelson, equipped with a camera, begins documenting the evidence methodically. His photographs, showing stacks of emaciated corpses, crematorium ovens, medical experimentation facilities, and surviving prisoners, will later become among the most powerful evidence of Nazi atrocities. "Make sure you get everything," Captain Keffer instructs him. "The world needs to see this, all of it." As the Americans continue their inspection, they face an immediate crisis. The surviving prisoners, seeing food and cigarettes in American possession, begin to mob the soldiers in desperation. Years of starvation have reduced many to an animal state where self-control has become impossible. Captain Keffer, recognizing the danger of a riot that could kill many weakened prisoners, works with resistance leaders to establish order. Through German-speaking Sergeant Gottschalk, He promises that food is coming, but must be distributed methodically to prevent further deaths. Tell them, Keffer instructs Gottschalk, that eating too much too quickly after starvation can be fatal. We must proceed carefully. This message, translated and passed through the camp, helps restore calm. The prisoners, having survived years of torment, can endure a few more hours of hunger if liberation is real. By 5 p.m., additional American units begin to arrive. Medics, supply trucks, and more combat personnel. The full liberation of Buchenwald is underway, but the humanitarian emergency is just beginning. The Americans now face a monumental challenge: how to provide emergency care to over 21,000 severely compromised individuals, many carrying contagious diseases, with limited medical supplies and personnel. The decisions made in the coming hours will determine how many of Buchenwald's victims survive their freedom. April 11, 1945, 6 p.m. As evening approaches, the full horror of Buchenwald becomes increasingly apparent to the American liberators. The initial patrol has been reinforced by elements of the 120th Evacuation Hospital and the 3rd Auxiliary Surgical Group, medical units with combat experience, but nothing that has prepared them for the scale of suffering they now confront. Captain Albert J. Givens, a military surgeon with the 120th, attempts to establish triage protocols amidst chaos. The camp's prisoner hospital contains over 2,000 critical patients. Thousands more require immediate medical intervention. "We need to prioritize," Givens tells his medical staff, their faces ashen with shock. "Focus on those we can save with immediate treatment. Document everything for evidence, but patient care comes first." The medical personnel work in the camp's infirmary, a place designed not for healing but for medical experimentation and death. The irony of using these facilities for genuine medical care is not lost on the Americans. Lieutenant Sophie Anderson, an Army nurse, holds the hand of a dying Polish prisoner as he whispers his last words. She doesn't understand his language but provides the only comfort she can: human contact after years of dehumanization. "I've been in combat hospitals since Normandy," she tells a colleague later, "but I've never seen anything like this. This wasn't war. This was industrial cruelty." Meanwhile, military authorities face an urgent logistical nightmare. Captain James Dean of the Quartermaster Corps calculates the immediate needs. 21,000 people require food, water, medicine, and sanitation facilities. The camp's water supply is contaminated. Food stores are non-existent. Medical supplies are depleted. "We need at least 20 tons of food immediately," Dean reports to Colonel George W. Reed, Jr., who has arrived to take command of the liberation operation. Plus water purification equipment, medical supplies, disinfectants, and temporary housing for those we need to evacuate from contaminated barracks. Colonel Reed nods grimly. "Requisition everything available within 50 kilometers. This is now our highest priority operation." A critical concern emerges immediately: disease control. Buchenwald has become a petri dish of infectious diseases. Typhus, spread by the lice infesting prisoners' clothing and bedding, poses a particularly serious threat. The disease could rapidly spread beyond the camp to American forces and the civilian population. Major William Callahan, an epidemiologist with the Medical Corps, implements emergency protocols. "All personnel entering the camp must be dusted with DDT powder," he orders. "No one exits without decontamination. We're establishing a quarantine perimeter immediately." This creates a painful dilemma. Prisoners desperate to leave their place of torment must remain quarantined for their own safety and that of others. Some, in their desperation for freedom, attempt to flee despite the quarantine. Military police establish a perimeter, creating the terrible optics of Americans appearing to imprison the already victimized inmates. "Explain to them," Major Callahan instructs translators, "that this is temporary, medical necessity only. We're not their new captors." As darkness falls over Buchenwald, generator-powered floodlights illuminate the continued emergency response. The Americans face a race against time. Many prisoners are so weakened that they balance on the edge of death despite liberation. Others, overcome with emotion at their freedom, overtax their fragile bodies in celebration. Food distribution becomes a life-or-death challenge. Military doctors know that feeding starved individuals improperly can trigger refeeding syndrome, a potentially fatal condition where the body cannot handle sudden nutrition after prolonged starvation. Small portions, high in glucose but low in protein, instructs Captain Givens, increase gradually over days. Too much too quickly will kill them after all they've survived. In the children's barracks, a particularly heart-wrenching scene unfolds. American soldiers discover over 700 children and adolescents, many orphaned, all traumatized beyond comprehension. Among them is 16-year-old Elie Wiesel, who will later become a Nobel Peace Prize laureate for documenting the Holocaust. Master Sergeant Robert Wilson, a father of 3 from Nebraska, coordinates care for these youngest survivors. His weathered face, hardened by combat across France and Germany, streaks with tears as he catalogs the children's condition. Most show signs of severe malnutrition, he reports. Many have untreated tuberculosis. All exhibit psychological trauma. Several are too young to remember any life before imprisonment. Wilson establishes a separate feeding station for the children, with soldiers volunteering their own rations to supplement official supplies. He assigns specific soldiers to care for groups of children, providing not just physical necessities, but human connection these young survivors desperately need. Throughout the night of April 11 to 12th, death continues to stalk Buchenwald despite liberation. Approximately 400 prisoners die in these first 24 hours of freedom, their bodies too damaged by years of abuse to recover. American medical personnel work tirelessly, but many can offer only palliative care, easing the passage of those beyond saving. Each death is documented meticulously, names recorded when known, photographs taken, personal effects preserved. After years of being reduced to numbers, the Americans are determined that these final victims will die with their humanity acknowledged. In the camp's makeshift morgue, a U.S. Army chaplain, Captain Joseph Sullivan, recites prayers over the dead without knowing their religious affiliations. "We don't know how each would want to be remembered," he tells an assistant, "so we honor all traditions. No one dies anonymous here anymore." As the first day of liberation ends, the Americans have taken control of Buchenwald, but face a humanitarian crisis of unprecedented scale. The immediate emergency response has begun, but the liberation of Buchenwald will require weeks of intensive effort, and the psychological liberation of its survivors will take lifetimes. April 12, 1945. Dawn breaks over Buchenwald, revealing the full scale of horror that darkness had partially obscured. The American forces, now reinforced with additional medical and logistics units, continue their desperate work to save as many lives as possible. Colonel George W. Reed, Jr. tours the camp at first light with Brigadier General William M. Hogue, who has arrived to assess the situation personally. What they witness will form the basis of official reports that eventually reach the highest levels of Allied command, including General Eisenhower himself. In 30 years of military service, General Hogue notes in his field journal, "I have never witnessed such deliberate cruelty. This transcends warfare." This was an industry dedicated to human suffering. The American command faces difficult decisions regarding evidence preservation versus humanitarian needs. The camp itself is a crime scene of unprecedented scale. Every barracks, the crematorium, the medical experimentation blocks, and the execution facilities contain evidence of war crimes. Yet these same facilities must now serve as emergency hospitals and housing for survivors. Lieutenant Colonel Hugh Scott, a military legal officer, works to balance these competing imperatives. "Document everything before modification," he instructs the evidence collection teams. "Photographs, film, sworn testimonies, physical samples. We need it all for the trials that must follow." Meanwhile, the medical crisis continues. Major Leon Ferber, Chief Medical Officer for the Liberation Operation, reviews the growing casualty figures with grim resignation. "We've lost another 250 overnight despite our best efforts," he reports. Refeeding syndrome, terminal typhus cases, tuberculosis, cardiac failure in compromised patients. Many were simply too far gone. Survivor testimonies later revealed the cruel irony that many prisoners, having endured years of torture and starvation, died within hours or days of liberation, their bodies surrendering once the desperate will to survive was no longer the only thing keeping them alive. The Americans implement stricter feeding protocols to prevent further refeeding deaths. Small portions 5 times daily rather than normal meals, glucose solutions before solid food, careful monitoring of each patient for adverse reactions. Lieutenant Philip Glassman, a Jewish-American medical officer, oversees the triage operations. His ability to speak Yiddish allows him to communicate with many Jewish survivors from Eastern Europe. The conversations haunt him. They keep apologizing for being a burden, he tells Captain Givens during a brief rest period. After everything they've endured, they apologize to us for needing help. It's unbearable. By mid-morning, journalists arrive, the first non-military Americans to witness Buchenwald. Among them is Edward R. Murrow, the CBS radio correspondent whose broadcast from Buchenwald will become one of the most famous journalistic reports of the war. Murrow, escorted by military public affairs officers, walks through the camp in stunned silence, notebook in hand. His normally eloquent professionalism falters in the face of industrialized atrocity. "I need to see everything," he tells his military escort. "The world must know exactly what happened here." Murrow visits the crematorium, where human remains still await disposal. He views the pathology lab where Nazi doctors collected human specimens for pseudo-scientific racial studies. He interviews survivors strong enough to speak, recording their testimonies with meticulous accuracy. Later that evening, he will transmit his historic broadcast, which begins, "I pray you to believe what I have said about Buchenwald. I reported what I saw and heard, but only part of it. For most of it, I have no words." As Murrow conducts his journalistic documentation, military intelligence officers implement a different kind of investigation. Captain Eric Kramer of Army Intelligence establishes an interrogation center in the former SS barracks, now cleansed of Nazi insignia, but still bearing witness to the regime's orderly approach to mass murder. The 15 SS guards captured during the uprising faced preliminary questioning. Most claimed they were just following orders or had no choice. Defenses that will become depressingly familiar during subsequent war crimes trials. Evidence against them is overwhelming. Survivor testimonies, photographic documentation, and the camp's own meticulous records of atrocities committed. One guard, SS Rottenführer Wilhelm Metzger, breaks under questioning and offers to provide detailed information about the camp's operations in exchange for consideration at trial. His testimony reveals the systematic nature of Buchenwald's horrors, the calculated starvation, the quotas for executions, the medical experiments conducted with bureaucratic approval from Berlin. "We had weekly death targets," Metzger admits during his recorded deposition. "Commandant Pister received them from higher authorities. If natural deaths from starvation and disease didn't meet the quotas, selections for execution made up the difference." This testimony, confirming the Reich's intentional genocide rather than mere prisoner mistreatment, becomes crucial evidence in subsequent Nuremberg trials. While this documentation of atrocities proceeds, the humanitarian crisis continues unabated. The sheer scale of need overwhelms even the substantial American resources now dedicated to Buchenwald. Military engineers work to restore clean water supplies. Medical personnel conduct mass delousing operations to control typhus. Quartermaster units distribute emergency rations carefully calibrated for severely malnourished individuals. Yet problems multiply. Dysentery spreads through barracks with inadequate sanitation. Prisoners with tuberculosis require isolation to prevent further contagion. The psychological trauma of survivors manifests in various ways. Some become nearly catatonic. Others experience violent outbursts. Many suffer nightmares and flashbacks that will plague them for decades. By the evening of April 12th, American authorities have established a more systematic response, but the situation remains desperate. The liberation of Buchenwald has only begun. The physical saving of lives is the first step in a much longer journey of recovery, justice, and remembrance. April 13, 1945. 3 days after liberation, the situation at Buchenwald has stabilized somewhat, but enormous challenges remain. General George S. Patton, commander of the Third Army, arrives for a personal inspection. His reaction, recorded by multiple witnesses, is uncharacteristically emotional for the normally stoic general. Upon viewing the crematorium and its grisly contents, Patton walks behind the building and vomits. Returning, white-faced but composed, he orders his staff, "Get photographs of everything. The world must see this, or else they'll think we're making it up." Patton's visit underscores the importance Allied High Command places on documenting the atrocities. Beyond humanitarian relief, Buchenwald has become a crucial evidence repository for planned war crimes prosecutions. Military policemen guard areas with significant evidentiary value, preventing well-meaning medical personnel from inadvertently disturbing crime scenes. Meanwhile, the medical situation continues to evolve. Colonel Robert Shelton, now commanding the medical response, faces a troubling development. Despite improved nutrition and medical care, the death rate among survivors remains alarmingly high. The damage inflicted by years of starvation and abuse cannot be quickly reversed. "We're losing approximately 150 per day now," Shelton reports during the morning medical briefing. "Better than the initial rate, but still catastrophic. Most deaths are from complications of extreme malnutrition, organ failure, heart arrhythmias, infection due to compromised immune systems." Major Evelyn Powell, a specialist in nutritional medicine, oversees the refined feeding program. "We're seeing classic refeeding syndrome in the most severe cases," she explains. "Their bodies have adapted to starvation so completely that normal nutrition triggers potentially fatal metabolic shifts. We're countering with phosphate supplements and extremely gradual caloric increases. The victims of medical experiments receive special attention. In Block 46, where Nazi doctors conducted typhus experiments, surviving test subjects exhibit unique medical challenges. Many were deliberately infected with typhus variants, then subjected to experimental vaccines with severe side effects. Captain Michael Fishman, a virologist with the Army Medical Corps, examines medical records recovered from Nazi physician Erwin Dingschuler's office. "These weren't scientific experiments in any meaningful sense," he reports with disgust. "The methodology was fatally flawed. They weren't seeking medical knowledge. They were torturing people with pseudo-scientific justification." Beyond the medical emergency, psychological trauma presents a less visible but equally significant challenge. Survivors exhibit various responses to liberation, from euphoria to profound depression, from hyperactivity to catatonia. Many cannot sleep without nightmares. Others display startling emotional numbness. Lieutenant Miriam Goldstein, a psychiatric nurse, observes these patterns with professional concern. "Their minds protected them during captivity by shutting down normal emotional responses," she notes in her medical log. "Now, in safety, those suppressed traumas are emerging. The psychological wounds may last longer than the physical ones." For child survivors, the psychological impacts are particularly severe. Many have known nothing but captivity. Some younger children cannot remember their parents or life before the camps. Others exhibit behaviors typical of much younger children: bedwetting, thumb-sucking, inability to speak, psychological regression in response to extreme trauma. Captain David Greenwood, a specialist in child psychology, works with these youngest survivors. "Many don't respond to normal comforting gestures," he reports. "When I reached out to pat a 7-year-old boy's shoulder, he flinched and covered his head, expecting a blow. They've been conditioned to expect cruelty from adults." The Americans implement a special program for child survivors: extra rations, dedicated caregivers, attempts to locate surviving family members. Where possible, children who speak the same language are kept together, preserving what little remains of their cultural identity. By April 13, the process of identifying liberated prisoners begins in earnest. Military clerks interview survivors strong enough to speak, recording names, nationalities, and any information about family members who might have survived elsewhere. This process reveals the truly international nature of Buchenwald. The camp held prisoners from 51 different countries, from France to Yugoslavia, from Norway to Greece. Czechs, Poles, Russians, Dutch, Belgians, Luxembourgers, Hungarians, Italians, and many others had suffered together under Nazi oppression. Jorge Semprún, a Spanish prisoner who survived to become a renowned writer, later described this moment of identity reclamation. After years as merely a number, 51498 in my case, someone asked my name. The simple humanity of that question undid me completely. The religious diversity of survivors presents another challenge for American authorities. Jewish survivors require kosher food options. Muslim prisoners from North Africa need facilities for ritual prayer. Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox Christians, and others seek spiritual comfort after years of religious persecution. Captain Joseph Weinberg, a Jewish chaplain, coordinates with other military religious personnel to address these spiritual needs. For many, their faith sustained them through hell, he observes. Now, in the first moments of freedom, they seek to reconnect with those spiritual traditions the Nazis tried to destroy. On this third day of liberation, another significant development occurs. Civilian German residents from nearby Weimar are brought to witness the atrocities. Colonel Robert Warner, following direct orders from General Eisenhower, organizes this forced confrontation with Nazi crimes. No German civilian will be permitted to deny knowledge of what happened here, Warner explains to his staff. They will see it with their own eyes, and their viewing will be documented for history. Approximately 1,000 civilians from Weimar, located just 7 kilometers from Buchenwald, are transported to the camp by military vehicles. Their reactions, captured by army photographers, range from genuine shock to carefully performed distress to blank-faced denial. One German woman, identified in military records as Elizabeth Schmidt, protests to her American escort. "We knew nothing of this. Nothing. How could we have known?" The American officer, Lieutenant Michael Cohen, responds with cold fury. "The stench of burning bodies carried for kilometers. Thousands marched through your streets. You chose not to know." This confrontation between German civilians and the evidence of Nazi atrocities foreshadows the larger reckoning Germany will face in the coming years. The challenge of acknowledging, documenting, and atoning for crimes committed in the nation's name. Buchenwald, after liberation, entered a new phase of existence, transitioning from active death camp to evidence repository to historical memorial. The processes initiated during those 20 days of American military presence continued evolving through subsequent decades, their significance extending far beyond the immediate humanitarian intervention. For survivors, liberation marked the beginning of complex recovery journeys rather than an endpoint. Physical rehabilitation continued for months or years, bodies severely damaged by prolonged starvation and abuse requiring extended medical intervention. Psychological recovery proved even more protracted, with many survivors experiencing what would later be classified as post-traumatic stress disorder throughout their lives. Jorge Semprún, a Spanish survivor who became a renowned writer, later reflected, "Liberation wasn't a single moment but a process, beginning with physical freedom but requiring psychological and spiritual liberation that continued for decades." Some aspects of the camp experience never fully left us. The question wasn't, "Did you survive Buchenwald?" but "How are you continuing to survive it?" For many Jewish survivors, particularly those from Eastern Europe, liberation led not to homecoming, but further displacement. Attempting to return to Poland, Hungary, and other countries, they often encountered continuing anti-Semitism and discovered their communities destroyed, homes occupied by others, and families annihilated. Approximately 250,000 Jewish survivors became displaced persons, living in specialized camps throughout occupied Germany, stateless refugees awaiting decisions about permanent resettlement. This displacement crisis contributed significantly to growing demands for a Jewish state in Palestine as the only guaranteed haven from persecution. The testimonies of Buchenwald survivors became powerful evidence supporting establishment of Israel in 1948, living witnesses to the consequences of statelessness during genocide. For the perpetrators, Buchenwald liberation initiated accountability processes that continued for decades. Evidence collected during those 20 days supported numerous prosecutions, most prominently the Nuremberg trials, where concentration camp atrocities featured centrally in charges of crimes against humanity. Hermann Pister, Buchenwald's commandant during liberation, was sentenced to death at the Dachau trials in 1947 and died of a heart attack while awaiting execution. Ilse Koch, the Witch of Buchenwald, notorious for collecting tattooed human skin, received a life sentence. Dr. Hans Eisel, who conducted medical experiments, escaped to Egypt through the rat line, helping Nazi criminals flee justice. Other perpetrators received varying sentences or evaded capture entirely. The pursuit of Buchenwald perpetrators continued for decades. As recently as 2023, German prosecutors investigated remaining living guards who participated in the camp's operations. This extended accountability process established important legal precedents regarding crimes against humanity, command responsibility, and the inadmissibility of following orders as defense for atrocities. For the physical site of Buchenwald itself, liberation began a complex evolution. After serving temporarily as a Soviet internment camp for Nazi prisoners from 1945 to 1950, Buchenwald was established as an official memorial site by the East German government in 1958. The memorial emphasized political resistance while somewhat minimizing Jewish victims, reflecting Cold War ideological frameworks rather than comprehensive historical documentation. After German reunification in 1990, Buchenwald underwent historical reassessment, creating more balanced presentation acknowledging both political persecution and racial genocide. Today, the Buchenwald Memorial receives approximately 600,000 visitors annually. The crematorium, medical experimentation block, and other significant structures remain preserved in their 1945 condition, physical testimony to atrocities that might otherwise seem implausible. For historical understanding, Buchenwald liberation established crucial documentation methodologies. The American military's systematic approach, combining physical evidence, documentary materials, survivor testimonies, and photographic film recording, created a comprehensive evidentiary foundation resistant to subsequent denial attempts. This methodology influenced Holocaust documentation more broadly, establishing standards for collecting and preserving evidence of genocide. Edward R. Murrow's radio broadcast from Buchenwald, with its famous opening, "I pray you to believe what I have said about Buchenwald," anticipated later Holocaust denial and established the importance of first-hand witnessing by credible observers. General Eisenhower's insistence on thorough documentation similarly reflected foresight about potential future denial, creating an evidentiary record so overwhelming that no reasonable person could dismiss it as fabrication. For medicine, Buchenwald liberation advanced understanding of starvation physiology, refeeding syndrome, and trauma recovery. The medical challenges encountered during those 20 days, treating severely malnourished individuals, preventing refeeding complications, addressing complex psychological trauma, provided valuable knowledge later incorporated into disaster medicine and humanitarian response protocols. The ethical questions raised by Nazi medical experimentation led directly to the Nuremberg Code, establishing informed consent requirements for human subjects research. For international law, Buchenwald evidence supported development of new legal frameworks addressing crimes transcending conventional warfare. The concept of crimes against humanity received concrete application through Buchenwald documentation, establishing that systematic atrocities against civilian populations constitute distinct violations beyond traditional war crimes. This legal innovation influences international humanitarian law to the present day. For collective memory, Buchenwald liberation established patterns for Holocaust commemoration, balancing documentation and emotion, individual suffering and systematic analysis, unique Jewish targeting, and broader Nazi persecution. The approaches developed during those 20 days, preserving physical evidence, recording survivor testimonies, documenting administrative systems, acknowledging different victim groups, continue influencing Holocaust memorialization globally. Elie Wiesel, who survived Buchenwald as a teenager and later received the Nobel Peace Prize for his Holocaust documentation, articulated the liberation's enduring significance. Liberation saved our bodies, but transformation of that experience into memory became our responsibility. We survivors bear witness not just to what happened to us, but to what humans can do to other humans, both the destruction we experienced and the redemption of liberation. 78 years after American forces entered Buchenwald on April 11, 1945, the significance of that liberation continues evolving. As direct witnesses diminish with time's passage, the documentation established during those 20 days grows increasingly valuable, preserving evidence of both human capacity for systematic cruelty and the moral imperative to intervene against it. Buchenwald today stands as simultaneously specific historical site and universal warning, its liberation representing not just a military operation that saved thousands of lives, but a moral confrontation with humanity's destructive capabilities and the constant vigilance required against their recurrence. Thank you for listening. If you are also proud of the bravery of our soldiers, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new historical stories.